Okay, here we go. This was this may end up being the most requested topic of all time. Who knows? Maybe you guys will watch this, maybe won't. It's a little different format because we're virtual. We brought in a couple guests today for Perigee, and we're going to talk about only one topic, and then we're going to get off the stage. So we'll be back with a more normal, what you guys are used to, Perigee, where we talk about a bunch of things. There's a lot of things going on for sure. We just wrapped up the E8 E9DT. I think we got an announcement coming soon on holistic health. I think we got an announcement soon on some other things. Guardian Spirit is going to be released soon. I think there's a lot of things happening, but we're not going to talk about those today. What we're going to talk about today is this sort of important conversation that I thought we had been having for quite some time. I still feel like a lot of us have been having it. Like I feel like I talk about it a fair amount, but over the last couple of weeks, this topic of beards has lifted again, and I made a fairly public comment on social media that, hey, I thought Guardians had wrapped their head around the policy and what we're doing, and I didn't realize that this was something that still needed a lot of discussion and understanding. And I was told that is not the case, that we did need to talk about it. So I said, okay, well, let's talk about it. So in the interest of me being committed to my growth and me learning and me knowing that I have blind spots just like everyone has blind spots. I wanted to make sure that we were doing what we could to talk through this topic and sort of walk through where the service is and where our minds are and where the policy is, and invite in some special guests to kind of talk through it and ask questions on everybody else's behalf. There was no picking, rather than just sort of a social media post that said, hey, if you're interested, raise your hand. And Sergeant Morse and Sergeant Jones have said, hey, we want to be a part. We had Senior Israel, who many of you know. He also was going to be with us this morning, but congratulations, Senior. New father, his beautiful wife, who's a wonderful human being. They both are, but they had a baby last night, so he ended up pulling out at the last minute, and so it's just the two of us, the three of us today. But we certainly wish Senior well, and hope everything's going well with the baby and proud parents. So congrats to them. Otherwise, I guess just real quick, we'll start with Sergeant Morse. Like, tell us like who you are and what you're doing, and are you escaped from the skiff at least for a few moments to do the podcast, I assume. So that's good. Well, welcome to daylight. Is that a window shining in on you? Is there actual light?
Morning, Chief. Most of the light is just from the I tried to open all the curtains in the hotel room and turn every single piece of light on so that I could actually get some vitamin D, I guess. Yeah, they let me out of the war games for a little bit so that I could come out for this. So I've been in the Air Force for 15 years and Space Force for a couple now. I'm a 5IO all-source analyst currently at the STARCOM headquarters, moving out to the 392nd next month. Haven't always had a beard. I did have a shaving waiver a long time ago, about 10 years now. It was hard to get. It was very hard to get, and it was only about 6 months long. I went into the doc last year and asked just for another 6-month one. He identified some scarring I didn't know about because I've always had it since I started shaving, and he put me on my current shaving waiver. That's where I'm at now.
And how long is this one good for?
5 years, which I'm still trying to wrap my head around. To be honest,
wrap your head around it, as if it's going to be 5, you might as well make it permanent, or like what do you think about 5 years?
Well, pretty much about wrapping my head around it as far as making it permanent or not, because admittedly, if it's a 5-year long thing for something that, at least in my case, like there's already permanent scarring, like it's not going to go away. And the underlying reason for it is that my facial hair tends to grow in, curl in, and then end up in my skin. I've pulled out like inch-long hairs before, or my wife has. But it's one of those things that, admittedly, like, and I've seen the other services go through ebb and flow over, the course of a decade and a half of permanent waivers, non-permanent waivers, permanent waivers, and then deciding that they were, going to change their mind on that later on. And everything in between. My personal feeling is that, beards should be allowed, but, whatever, that's just like my opinion, right? So, obviously, like, I know the DoD policy, I know the Air Force policy, I understand the tradition, for lack of a better term, behind it. May not agree with it, but there's a lot of things we don't agree with, and we do them anyways because that's what we signed up for.
Yeah, well, we'll talk about all that. Let's introduce Sergeant Jones, Sheepdog.
Good morning, Chief. Thank you for having me.
Is that what everyone calls you, or is that just what I call you?
That's what everybody calls me. So I was
Yeah.
formerly shop. And I was in the weapons and tactics shop. So they kind of give everybody a call sign, and that was my call sign. So it's followed me a little bit. I'm in a different unit now. It still followed me. So I'm trying to shed that one and get a new one. So hopefully when I talk to you next,
how come?
I think I have one that I want, and usually you don't get the one that you want. It's kind of somebody just gives you one from something that's they made joked about or something like that. So one that I want is a couple people they know. So I'll let them know about it when they watch this. They'll get a good laugh. But yeah. So I'm Sergeant Jones. I've been in 4 years. I'm a 5 Sierra. Right now, I'm at the 18 Space Dev 1 inside the NSDC. So I'm a young guy in a big C2 center. So it's a very interesting perspective that I've recently gotten. And before in 4 stops, I had a different perspective being one of the many airmen in the big squadron. So I kind of had 2 different perspectives of space operations. And I've had a beard for about 2 years. I did honor guard, so and actually they just were able to alleviate the pressure of people in honor guard not being able to have a beard. So when I was in honor guard, you couldn't have a beard, and my face is like a crunch bar, like a Hershey's crunch bar. It was just ingrown hairs everywhere, and I mean I would shave, pop back through the bumps and everything. So I was having a rough time. So as soon as I got out of honor guard, I think the next day I went and got a waiver. And since then, I just that was a 6-month waiver, and I think I renewed it again. And then at that point, they had 5-year waivers. So I've just been appreciative of the fact that I don't have to go in every 6 months to get a new waiver, even if it is just 5 years.
Yeah. Well, thanks for being on, and thanks for everything. And hopefully the new unit is awesome. I know they were very proud of the last one, so it's good. I think I think I already said it, that you guys aren't ringers, but I feel like I know you both, and maybe from the outside looking in, if people don't account for the size of our service, and if Senior would have been here, I know him as well. I don't want anyone to think that I brought in ringers. You guys you guys raised your own hands, but it's kind of cool to be part of a Space Force where I do know you, and that we have these we can have these kind of conversations. So I appreciate you guys coming on and talking through it. So let's go through kind of my background on the topic. In 2018, I worked for Assistant Secretary of the Air Force, and the Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force at the time said, "Hey, we should look at this beard thing." I actually brought it to him and I said, "Hey, I think that there's a problem. We're seeing some data that might indicate that that we've got some challenges, that if you have a shaving waiver, that it's hurting your career, and we've got certain demographics that it looks like in the early data looks like that there's a problem there." And he said, "Okay, let's look at it." And so we started looking at it, and for sure, And I've talked to occupational health experts. I've talked to dermatologists. I've talked to general practitioner physicians about this. We really were hoping back then to find an easy answer. I'd talked to over the last, well, if that was in 18 and it's 23 now, so let's say 5 years. So over the last 5 years, we talked to physicians, talked to mental health professionals, talked to chaplains, talked to advocates for change, talked to D&I experts, talked to allied nations that authorize beards. Like, we really have been, General Raymond, in early on after we stood up to service, he said, hey, do we need, like, we got to look at this. So I mean, we've taken a very, I think, honest look, and the data is interesting because the data shows us that more than, it's hard to get a good number, but between most experts would tell us between 40 and 70%. So I just say more than half of African American men can't shave every day without some form of skin challenges resulting. About 3% of Caucasians fall into that category, and the last time I talked to Air Force doctors on the topic, very few of like Asians or Islanders. There's a lot of types of skin and a lot of types of hair, but no doubt that the place where it's most challenging is with African American men. So if you have this requirement to shave every day, and if you sort of stand by it with blinders on and say, hey, if you can't shave every day, then by definition, you're a bad service member. And we're not going to let you, as you brought up, be on the honor guard. We're not going to let you brief DVs when they come around. We're not going to let you win awards. We're not going to let you, fill in the blank. Won't let you be a first sergeant, won't let you be a TI, won't let you be a technical instructor. Whatever the case. When we started peeling it back, we found that we had really, in the sake of professionalism, we had scripted a lot of policies that were having an unintended consequence of marginalizing people. And that should bother all of us, right? Like, it's not good. And so we went to work fixing those, and now those policies have all been changed. There's also an unwritten kind of cultural aspect, right? Like, there's rules, and there's written rules, and there's unwritten rules. Sometimes they go hand in hand, and sometimes, unfortunately, they don't go hand in hand. That's a big part of our calculus on this, is that it's hard to understand unwritten rules. And so so you both have been wearing beards with the appropriate waiver now for a while. What is that, Sergeant Jones? What's that feel like? I met you because you were being lifted up by your organization as a superhero, right? Like, this is the guy. Like, if you don't meet anyone else, we want you to meet this guy. So it seemed to me like they don't have a problem with your face. Like, I love your face, but I'm not you. So what does it feel like to be you day to day now? What did it feel like as an airman in the past? Like, do you feel like we're making progress on the unwritten rules? The written rules have changed, so we can declare progress, but is that enough? Like, is the change happening? What does it feel like to you?
Yes, Chief. I think, when I first got my, I think it's important to go back to when I first got my waiver. I was at Vandenberg for undergraduate space training, and you had to go to the 30th Space Wing medical to get your waiver. And so I was brand new out of basic, and you couldn't get a waiver in basic. So then once I got to medical there, I was like, hey, I really need a waiver. And they kind of just had like 5 or 6 guys in a room, and it was kind of like a briefing on, And it was literally a briefing on why shaving waivers are pretty much bad. Like, you're going to be looked at as a dirtbag. Nobody's going to take you serious. It's going to affect your career. That was my first like introduction into what having a beard would be like in the, you know, the Air Force at that time. So it gave me this stigma in the back of my head where I'm like, oh my God, people are going to look at me a certain way. People are going to, you know, regardless of how hard I work, you know, how good I am in my job, whatever I do, people are still going to have this stigma in the back of their head when they look at me. So once I moved on from there, I felt like I always tried to do good, and I don't ever feel like I had any roadblocks or obstacles in my way. But there was still that stigma in the back of my head that I felt from going exactly back to that moment. And as I moved on throughout my career up until now, you know, when I was in Force Ops, I was in weapons and tactics, and we were put in a lot of high visibility situations, you know, whether it was going to Space Flag and briefing former General Buck, or, you know, whether it was briefing our just down to our squadron commanders, our Delta commanders. We did that on a regular basis. So, you know, they had the faith in me that I would be good enough at my job and have a beard. So in the back of my head, I'm like, okay, you know, I think we are making great strides to be able to be inclusive of people with beards. So I don't necessarily think that as a force that we really do have a problem with it. I just think the most important boundary in the back of my head is what I heard when I was a young airman. And so now I kind of like move every day, and especially like I said, now being in like a C2 center, there's more majors and colonels than there are anybody else. And so when I'm kind of walking around, I'm like, I wonder if they feel like I'm, you know, not as capable as the next guy just because I do have a beard. And so, you know, I don't even necessarily think they do. I think actually, you know, they know that I can perform very well and to a high level. But, you know, it's just something that really does play in the back of my head. And so I think it would just be something that I have to get over. But then, you know, I had also talked to some other African-American, you know, commissioned officers, non-commissioned officers who have been in a while, and they don't have beards because of that prior Air Force stigma that was placed upon them of those same type of briefings, that same kind of attitude towards it. And, you know, I had to tell me, look, I'm at the point in my career where I feel like a beard would kill my momentum. It would kill the things that I've done. It would kill my accomplishments. So at this point, I'll just take the, you know, the scars on my face. I'll have to shave back through the bumps and all that, because I feel like I care about my career more than my, you know, I think that affects your mental health, your physical health. So, you know, I like to answer your question. I think that the Space Force has really done a good job of being on top of problems and trying to create a conducive environment to inclusivity and actually making people feel like they want to be in a good work environment, regardless of what you look like.
Yeah, I think I remember I had a conversation out in one of the SSC units, and a young FGO told me, you know, this story. Like, I'm just dealing with it because I don't want to take the chance. Like, I don't want to accept the risk. And I begged him. I said, you gotta be you. Like, you gotta let us. I see, you know, my teammate down the hall, like, she's a lot more active on social media than I am, and she's taking photos with folks with waivers and with accommodation. We're doing what we can to sort of normalize this. I think across the board, certainly in the Space Force. I hope we just, in fact, at AFA 2 weeks ago, we had one of our award winners that we called up on stage in front of everyone had a beard. I don't know if it was accommodation or medical profile. It doesn't matter, right? Like, I assume that it's for the right reasons, and it's good, right? Like, I make the analogy a lot that it's no different than I need prescription lenses. Like, you're not supposed to discriminate against me because of it. What about you, Sar Morse? What are you seeing? Are you seeing it change? Are you seeing it the same? What's it feel like to have your face?
So, Chief, I think a little over 10 years ago, when I got that first waiver, I got a lot of side eye from my commander and his staff. And I was in a little detachment outside of Fort Belvoir in civies, doing stuff and things with people. But that 6 months was interesting because I was getting a lot of, you can't call it negative attention, but you can tell when somebody's looking at you, you know, and they're not approving, right? didn't really affect my career, I don't think, at the time. But it definitely isn't a good feeling knowing that your leadership is not necessarily on board with the way that you look. The second go around, aside from a couple of odd looks of like, oh hey, I haven't seen you in 3 months and now you've got a beard, what's going on? Other than that, I think it's been pretty simple. I mean, honestly, more than anything else, people are like, oh hey, great beard, blah blah blah. Which it definitely has like boosted a little bit of self-confidence and things like that. It's definitely more white than it used to be, but that will happen. I feel like the stigma thing is a lot less. I'm sure it still exists in some corners. I think I've probably internalized a lot of that stigma myself, like just from my entire career of like, yeah, beards are bad. You shouldn't have shaving waiver. If you do, you got to have your waiver on you. You got to make sure you're following it to the letter. You got to like, because I had troops that had shaving waivers, and as a supervisor, I had to make sure they were following the the rules, because otherwise they were going to get chiefed by somebody, or hemmed up because, well, today's Tuesday and you shaved yesterday and you're supposed to shave like on alternate days or whatever the waivers used to be, and all the hoops you had to jump through to get them for a legit medical issue. So I think it's better. I think it's a lot better, at least in my corner of the Space Force that I've seen so far.
Yeah, your tiny, dark corner with no windows and hiding behind
And
doors.
milk has vitamin D in it, Chief.
Yeah.
We're all good.
So, in full disclosure, in 97 or 98, I was on a shaving medical profile. I had developed a acute but significant bout with had my own bout with PFB, and I went through that same journey, right? In fact, in those days they sent me to class to teach me how to shave, and I mean it was tough, and you couldn't wait to work your way through it. And in my case, a sort of adjustment in technique made a difference, which 10 years 20 years later was one of the questions when I got the experts on the phone. I said, okay, but this is really about shaving, right? Like if you use a sharp enough razor and hot enough water and good enough product and you get a fancy badger brush, like it's going to be okay. Like everyone can shave, right? Like I wanted an answer that worked for everyone. And they were like, no, that's not how it works. And I'm like, and neither does, now everyone's different, right? There's a spectrum, but everyone, the only solution is to not shave. So not shave every other day, not relax standards so that you do it once a month. Like that doesn't fix it. The only thing that the only appropriate way forward is to not shave, if it's a significant enough case. And so that's the right answer. That's where the 5-year waivers come in. That's where the sort of we've evolved our thinking on what those waivers look like. It's all because of this reality that, hey, there's only one answer. That's not to shave, and it doesn't matter how well you shave. If you've got a problem, you've got a problem. The other thing that we went through that I remember I asked with, like, I was hoping, I said, okay, so tell me that if I suffer from this problem, that if I let my beard grow out, it's going to be this beautiful full beard, right? So now we can go to this sort of professional beard standard, like vis-a-vis the Canadians or RAF guys use, and like everyone that needs a waiver will be able to grow one of those beautiful beards like that, right? And they're like, oh no, that's not how it works. And so, and this is really where some of these other, like the details of kind of our decisions become important. What the research shows us, and a Google search I think will validate this, but feel free. Gents, you've been way too cooperative, by the way, so that when this hits the interwebs, you're going to be labeled as ringers and bad people, and you're siding with the man. I just prepare yourselves for the hate, because it sometimes comes on the interwebs. But anyway, if you go Google this, you'll find that only about half of us over the age of 30, us being men, over the age of 30 can grow what would be an acceptable beard in those, by those other standards, or by there was a draft proposal brought forward, right? For, hey, let's let handsome men, I always say handsome men wear beards, but this nice, full, beautiful beard, we can accept that this looks professional, right? And certainly we can accept that a full, and if you do the research, you know, a full, well-groomed, clean, manicured beard is considered acceptable in a far wider range of professions today than it was even 10 years ago. But we don't all have access to a beard like that. Only about half of us over the age of 30 have access to a beard like that. And so a policy like that doesn't eliminate waivers for medical conditions, and it doesn't eliminate the need to accommodate religious, deeply held beliefs. And so this was really a very kind of important part of our choice. We're like, hey, does changing the rules change the unwritten rules? Yes or no? And then does changing the rules eliminate waivers and accommodation, the need for waivers and accommodation? Well, the answer to the second is definitely no. Like, we know that people would still need shaving waivers and still need accommodation if you wrote a policy that said, if you can grow a beard like Ron Swanson or Ice Cube, then you can have a beard, but the rest of you can't have a beard. So if you write a policy like that, it still excludes enough people that accommodation and waivers would still be necessary. And then on the first one, do written rules change unwritten rules? Maybe. There's, you know, this wouldn't certainly be a historical precedent. There have been plenty times in the history of mankind where people have implemented law or policy or rules to try to control the way people think or change the way people think. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, right? And so we don't really have an answer to that question. And it's certainly something that is, it's a worthy discussion to go, does changing the rules change the unwritten rules? Well, what I'm hearing though, and what I see with my own eyes, in the way that we're recognizing people, and I really wish Senior was with us today because he's one of the most well-respected senior NCO guardians that we have. He's got beautiful beard, and but it seems like, anecdotally, like we're moving in the right direction. And what I hear from you guys is we're moving in the right direction. And when you've got sort of this control group, if you will, in other words, we've made some changes. We did the root cause analysis. And we said, whoa, these policies are problematic. Let's change them. And now we're collecting more data. To me, and some will say I'm tone deaf, but to me, that's the problem-solving process that we've always all been taught, right? Identify some root causes, make some changes, then measure results, and then reevaluate. We may find that that in a couple of years, if we look at the impact of shaving waivers and career advancement, that we've made no change, and that there's still a negative correlation between if you have shaving waiver or accommodation and career advancement. And if we find that out, then we'll know that, hey, this was not the right solution. And then we'll have to try something else. It seems sensible to me that this is the right sequence. In other words, if you go to the more, like, let's just open it up for everyone. Well, now what are you measuring, and what do you see, and where's the control of that process? And if that doesn't work, what's next? You know, like, what do you go to next? But it sounds to me, from what you guys are saying, and what it looks to me from my own eyes, that, yeah, you know what, this might just be getting better. And that we're certainly not saying those things. When you guys went to get your current waivers, you didn't get lectured about all of the, hey, you know, they're going to label you as a bad person and blah, blah, blah. It's a very different process now on the medical front. We know we've got rid of the rules, and it feels better. Does that seem to you guys as a sensible kind of process to kind of go through this, or at least, you said earlier, like you might not agree, but does it at least seem understandable that we might want to do it in an orderly kind of sequence of decisions so that we know what's working and what isn't working? Does that seem unreasonable? Or
Chief, I think it definitely checks out. And like you said, I think there has been I can tell that there has, just from you talking, that there's been a lot of thought process put into it. And I think that's something that'll give people a lot of, ease to say, okay, people really hear our concerns and they are thinking about the problems. I know one thing, and I will shout out the Air Force / Space Force beard page. They got a big following, and there's a lot of people in there who are really fired up about the topic. So there was a problem with rightfully so, women having to put their hair in a bun every day. It was giving them headaches. It was causing hair damage and stuff, And so there was a lot of concern about that. And then they were able to, wear ponytails, and even took a long time for, senior NCO women and colonels or whatever to feel like they would feel comfortable wearing their hair down. And I think it's still some room to grow in that aspect too. But I've seen a lot of people saying, okay, they've done that. They have okay neck tats, or neck tattoos, even though they're pretty small, it's nothing big. They've okay hand tattoos. So it seems like whether it's to, I think both sides, it'll help recruitment, it'll help retention. But why can't we get beards? I feel like it's like people are looking at those type of things like, okay, they're trying to make progress in certain ways, whether it's to recruit people, whether it's, whatever the thought process was behind it. Why would they approve neck tattoos and all this other stuff before there's a real problem that men are facing? Because, even if you're white, black, whatever, shaving is pretty hard on your face to do every day if you have PFB or not. So I think that's one concern that I would feel like I didn't utilize the opportunity to just ask you.
yeah, so I think it can be a bit of a fool's errand sometimes to try to compare apples and oranges. Sometimes that leads us down some, I think, some logic flaws. But let's talk about those things that you brought up real quick. One, and remember we talked about would implementing a beard policy eliminate the waivers? And the answer was no. But eliminating the women's hair, although I don't think they're exactly the same kind of situation, but eliminating the requirement for buns did eliminate the medical problem completely. So all women can wear their hair like that. There's none that are excluded. In fact, some of the early drafts did not seem to be accurately accounting for all types of hair, and we changed them so that, no kidding, this is accessible to 100% of women and removes this medical problem from 100% of women's lives if they choose to do this. Now, there's some unwritten culture still going through, right, with the ponytails for sure, but but again, it seems to be heading in the right way. But that's a significant difference between this apple and this orange, is that on one side, this completely eliminated the medical condition, and it was 100% accessible to everyone. Now, the only way we could do that for beards is to say, you don't have to shave at all. Like, just do what you want. You can shave, you can not shave, and we're not ready to do that. And none of the proposals that have come forward, that was what was being asked for. Like, I think that there's still that we still aren't on this, there isn't a single opinion on what a professional authorized beard might look like. There certainly is an easy to define medical route and an easy to define religious accommodation. On the tattoos, I'll just speak just from a Space Force. When we set the policy, and this was across the board with pretty much all of our dress and appearance, certainly the sort of the permanence of a tattoo, and I'll say that in quotation marks, because you can have them removed through a process, usually pretty well. But but the permanence of a tattoo is very different than the permanence of, for instance, cutting my hair because I want to have a mullet, you know, like it's a very different problem. But the reason why we landed on the dress and appearance policy sort of in general is the lens was, how do we be as accepting as any service while not being outside of the bounds of all the services. So as inter-service transfers are coming into the Space Force, we didn't want to send a message that, hey, that tattoo is okay when you're a sailor, but it's not okay for us. Now, perhaps we could have approached that with case-by-case waivers, et cetera, but we just didn't feel like the tattoos or the ponytail length or some of, I guess those are really the two things that we didn't think that they were that different service to service that we couldn't just adopt the most liberal of all the policies. So that's why we landed on that. There wasn't really much thought put into it beyond that. On tattoos, it was like, hey, figure out who allows the most and let's do what they're doing, just so that we can have these inter-service transfers comes in. So that doesn't mean it's some perfect solution. I'll just explain that's how we arrived at that. I think those are the two kind of, yeah, I hear that, you know, a lot. Sorry, Morse, what am I missing?
So, Chief, to get back to your question, like it does seem like there's a reasonable process. I think one of the areas where people are having trouble is that they don't know where it ends, because, you know, the future is always unknown, right? And people don't know that where that's going because we've only ever been told one solid answer. But then we hear things, and we hear, you know, oh, well, we're looking at this, we're looking at that. And so it gives people sort of, whiplash isn't the right term, but it gives people that like, well, what's going on?
Yeah.
We talk about beard standards though, like, I don't know about you. I grew the standard horrible airman first class mustache way back in the day. Because, you know, you got to explore the limits, and I found them. But when we talk about what looks like a professional beard, if we have, you know, an 18, 19-year-old Sikh or Muslim or pagan Norse, you know, whatever, and their beard's patchy because they're 18 years old, they're still going to have that religious accommodation, and it's still going to be quote unquote professional, even though it's a patchy, scruffy beard. From admittedly, I'm Christian, but from a non-religious standpoint, it seems like it shouldn't matter necessarily what your religion is if one is considered professional but one isn't, simply because one is religious and the other isn't. And that's the other type of thing that people bring up a lot. I know you've seen it, everybody's seen it. At the same time, like, it's great that, I mean, maybe not neck tattoos, whatever, but it's great that women were allowed to, like, not have to, you know, put migraine inducing hairstyles up. Like, my wife gets migraines, and when she has one, like, she can't touch her hair. Like, I know what that's like. And it's great that they were able to get that. And I don't think anybody's really equating the two things per se, but there's similarities, and humans recognize patterns, right? So we naturally latch on to, oh, this is kind of similar to this, and so therefore it should get the result that I want, because that's just human nature. If I had like the crystal ball as an analyst, I could say, oh yeah, in 5 years, I know that this leads towards some kind of grand compromise and stuff. That'd be amazing. But, you know, we don't have that. And so the people that are really charging for it are in that nebulous, like, hey, I don't know what's going on, and that makes me unhappy, and grumble on Reddit.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's a little disappointing that that there's people who would intentionally stir the pot for whatever reasons. I know you guys are aware that there were pretty significant rumors that there was a pilot being launched and you could volunteer to be on the pilot, but that was not at the service level. That was never happening. So why was that rumor started? What was the and it's just it's just something that we've got to work through. But that's why we're doing this, right? Like, we don't want to lead people on. So if there's, in general, there's 3 conversations. There's a conversation about, I have deeply held beliefs that I should have facial hair, and will you accommodate me or not? And we've answered that. The answer is yes, and we have done that with religious accommodation. And to be fair, that's always, we talked about this offline. That's always the conversation about accommodation. It's not a question of denying. We fight. We put on a uniform to defend people's right to believe whatever they want to believe. That's what makes our nation great. There are some deeply held beliefs that the military cannot accommodate. And so every time we have these conversations, that's literally, can we accommodate this or not? And to your point, that was the conversation a few years ago, before we really embraced and said, no, we are going to accommodate these deeply held beliefs. But that was the conversation. Is it professional? Is it not? For centuries, in fact, in history and even extending through science fiction, a military force that all looks exactly the same is scary. It's deterrence. Like, this is legendary, right? Like stormtroopers and those were the guys in Game of Thrones, right? Like this is what's scary. And so this has been sort of the military norm for a long, long time. It's why we look the same. It's why we train the same. It's why we move in unison. Like, these things are part of a traditional military mindset. And so changing them took time and will take time and do take time. And so, but that certainly was the conversation, was, should we accommodate this? Can we accommodate this? Or does it start to deteriorate good order, discipline, lethality, and readiness? And the answer on religious accommodation was no, we'll accommodate. And the same thing with medical. So that's the second one. So religious accommodation is one conversation, and then medical necessity is another. And we've had that one pretty well today, right? And then the third one is, I just want to. And I get it when we say when I call that fashion, it's a little bit of a trigger for folks, but it's just, hey, I want to. It's cool, and I want to look cool. And I don't want to have to grow a white wall around my ears anymore, and I want to put a ring in my nose. Like, there's any number of things that we want to do. And there's nothing wrong with wanting those things. And whenever there's a uniform board, you raise your hand and you say, hey, we want this to be considered, and this is exactly what we think the policy should look like. And then we look at it, and then we make a decision. And I think that will continue. Beards continue to gain, although they're waxing a little bit, but waning a little bit at the moment, in favor of mustaches, frankly, in like society. But they continue to gain in popularity, certainly since they became more normal kind of at the turn of the century. And so they're becoming more and more normal. They're not a societal norm at this point. They're still, in general, beards are worn to make a statement of some sort. They're not the conservative look. They just aren't. And in general, the military look will be a conservative look. It's just like long hair, like face jewelry, like it all. So it's all in that same bucket. And none of it is, you're not a bad person to want to do that. Every time I'm on leave, I grow my beard out. Like, it's fine. But what becomes sort of heartbreaking is if we conflate these things. Like, if you just want to grow a beard because it's cool, and you conflate it with a very important conversation on discrimination, that's sad. Like, we don't want to do that. We want to keep these conversations separate, except in so much as they may lend supporting fires to each other. And I guess the final thing is, I would just, we have to remember that we serve the American people, all people, and all generations. So beards are certainly trending among young people right now. And they're seen more widely in a wide variety of places, but still the general perception, right? If we film a movie, right? I'm waiting for the movie where when you find the hero that's fallen off the wagon, is in the worst place in his whole life. He's clean shaven. And then when he becomes a mighty hero again, he's growing out a beard. Like, that's not the normal Western trope, right? We just aren't to societal norm yet. We're certainly trending towards generational preference, but we're not to societal norm. So I think these conversations are fine. I think they're healthy. I think we should keep having them. I think keep rooting for whatever, you know, like we're in a different place. We haven't really changed the rules in riding, but we're in a very different place, for instance, with grooming aids today than we were when I came in 30 years ago. If I wore the amount of pomade that is popular and commonplace today and looks very professional today, but if I would have worn that in 1990, I would have got a letter of counseling, right? So, you know, societal norms change, and I think that beards might change, and we might find that these things we've done, these changes to allow barrier-free service for people that need medical waivers or have asked for religious accommodation. Maybe it's not enough. The rules that we've changed, it might not be enough, and we might have to do something more. My biggest worry, and it's my sincere worry, is that if you change the written rules, do bad people or people that have misplaced values or perspective, do they now have an excuse to discriminate against you? In other words, do they start saying, you got what you wanted, Morris, you got your beard, but I don't have to think you're professional, right? Like, do you bring that behavior out if you give it to everyone? I don't know, but that's my fear. That's been my fear from the beginning, because well, frankly, because we sometimes see that. Okay, you guys got what you wanted, but now I'm more mad at you, right? Like, you start dividing people into us and thems instead of saying, hey, whatever your face looks like is good with me. And if this was a conversation about eye patches and I needed an eye patch, everyone wouldn't be asking to wear an eye patch because I needed one, but they would be expected to accept me for mine. And I wouldn't be able to wear a fuchsia one, right? Or a one with butterflies. It would have to match my uniform. Like, there would be some professional standard applied to it. I think this is kind of, not everyone has to agree, but that's kind of where we are from a leadership perspective, and where do we place our efforts and where do we accept risk, and how do we explain this in a way that gives us the best opportunity to move forward with good order and discipline and hearing all voices. And so I'm going to give you guys the last words. We're going to wrap it up, but that was kind of what I wanted to do here today. And hopefully anyone that's listened to this conversation sort of gets that a little bit. And if not, we can keep having the conversation. I am not afraid to talk about this. I'm happy to talk about it. I was talking about it quite regularly, and then it had sort of died down. I don't think it's not a good topic for for 140 character bits or one-liners on social media. I don't think it's a good conversation. That's not a conversation, right? Lobbing, opinions back and forth isn't helpful, but conversations like this will never bother me. So I'm going to continue to kind of toe the line and say, I don't want to get into this in social media. If you want to talk to me about it, grab me. But I hope that this has sort of helped people kind of understand. And Sergeant Jones, you said, I promise you, brother, like, I have thought about, if there was an easy, responsible way forward, like, I have already taken a photo of me in uniform with my beard, like, I'm ready to go, because that would be the final piece, right? Is if we did authorize it, then leaders need to immediately show everyone that it's okay. I just couldn't get there, and my responsibility to all guardians right now favors our decision, or is in line with our decision to say, hey, let's make these changes to policy. Let's see what happens, and let's keep having this conversation about hey, I just think you should modernize your perspective on professionalism a bit. So we'll go Sergeant Jones and Sergeant Morse. You guys get the last word. So you go first, Sheepdog, or whatever the new. I think Sheepdog is a fantastic nickname, by the way. I have great admiration for sheepdogs. Having raised, grown up on a farm that raised sheep for a while, like, that's hard work to protect the flock from all enemies and yet never be mean towards the flock. It's a fine balance to be vicious enough to defend against evils and kind enough and nurturing enough to care for the flock. I think sheepdogs are pretty amazing, but
You just gave me a whole perspective on the call sign. I actually like it more now.
good.
But thank you, Chief. I just want to say, first and foremost, I think what you just did was great here, just even allowing us to be here and just facilitate the conversation and just show people that you care. I think that's more than you had to do, and I think that's more than we've seen being done. So I appreciate that. And I just want to say, you know, and as I've heard you talk about when I watched the House Armed Service Committee with you and the rest of the service-wide chiefs or top enlisted leaders talking about, you know, what problems face the force, and I think you were able to capture everything very well. I just do hope that as the Space Force, I look at us as the most trailblazing branch. Maybe I'm a little bit biased, but I hope that in the future that we can continue to keep trailblazing and breaking down some of those norms as we continue to figure out how to keep an all-volunteer force and how to increase recruitment, increase retention, which, like you said, we don't really have a recruitment problem, but we might possibly have a retention problem. That's above me. But I do think that when we start to look, you know, at civilians, maybe we can model how we shape our rules and regulations so that we can continue to retain that talent and be able to recruit that talent. Because if you look at, you know, Black males, or I guess Black people make up 12% of the US population, but 16% of the DoD. When you start looking at Black males, they look nothing like the Black males that you see in the military, because just the way the rules and regulations are. So as we continue to try and like win this next fight and keep that all volunteer force, I would just hope that we can continue to make ourselves look a little bit more like civilians. That's just my personal opinion. You know, I think that'll help us to get the best and brightest people, and I have people say, you know what, I would love to join the military, but I can't. I have to cut my dreads. I have to do this. I have to do that. You know, that's just my take on it. Once again, thank you, Chief. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, thanks, man. Sergeant Morse, take us home.
Chief, thank you again for setting this up. This is, looking back at the beginning of my Air Force career, this is not the type of conversation I ever would have expected to be having. It's wild. It's really cool. I liked what Sergeant Jones talked about looking normal. I've always heard Beards talk about from like an OPSEC perspective, and having spent an awful lot of time stationed overseas. In parts of Europe, some of us stick out more than others. Parts of Asia, some of us stick out more than others. But you can always tell an American service member by just like, oh, the sideburns are only so short, and there's no facial hair, and it's a certain hairstyle, or maybe three. Dreads would be interesting. I'm not advocating for that. That'd be interesting though. It's a really good conversation. It's a lot to think about. And hopefully nobody would ever accuse me of not trying to stick it to the man at any given possible.
No, you're in, man. You're gonna be, they're gonna lasso you right in. You're a traitor now.
That was that terrible realization I had when I became an NCO. It's like, crap, I'm the man now. Dang it. But no, Chief, thank you. This was a great conversation. And hopefully there will be more of them and less sniping from the internet trenches of anonymous people yelling at each other.
Yeah, you know, I think it's all good. I don't mind. The only thing that bums me out is when the anonymity claims that I'm letting down Guardians. Like I don't, like, the rest of the world can think what they want. I owe you all my best effort, and I hope that you see what we're doing and what I'm doing, and that's the only part that that's the part that we take serious. Everybody's got an opinion, and you can't please all people at all times, all those normal things. I hope though that you see how hard we're trying to get this right, and how much thought and effort we put into getting it right. So thanks you both for your grace, and can't wait to see you again soon. And yeah, we'll see. It'll take a few days to get this out on the street, but you guys will make sure you tag me when you post it, and tell your loved ones and all that. Thanks for helping us think through hard problems. Appreciate you. We're out on this end.